Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Giant Buried Swastika. The city of Hamburg in Germany recently destroyed a giant concrete swastika that was found buried on a sports field of a residential neighborhood. Imagine playing soccer and finding a swastika. The shameful symbol of Nazi Germany was about 12 feet wide on each side, and it was built 72 years ago as part of a government program. The swastika was originally covered in bricks and used as the foundation for a monument celebrating the strength of German workers. But that monument was torn down in 1945. Following the end of World War II, angry locals in Hamburg smashed apart the monument and left the brick foundation, with the swastika hidden beneath the earth. They covered it up with some dirt, and everyone forgot it was there. Eventually, the spot became a park. It was used as a sports field, and then the field was dug up to reveal the very thing everyone had forgotten was there. Right after the discovery was made, there were calls to preserve the huge concrete swastika for historical purposes, but this was followed by a huge uproar from the locals, who said they didn't need a massive concrete hate symbol to remind them of their past. And so, jackhammers and bulldozers came and destroyed the swastika once and for all. Number 9. Salish War Club. An ancient Native American artifact was discovered in a backyard in Vancouver Island. Mark Lake was cleaning his yard after a big storm in April of 2022 when he came across a piece of wood sticking out from under a maple tree. Mark lives in the seaside village of Royston, a small hamlet where most people know their neighbor. When he retrieved the piece of wood, he was shocked to see that it had been carved by human hands. It felt important, and so he reached out to the local Kamox First Nation. Chief Nicole Rempel described the discovery as pretty exciting. Nicole has been working with repatriation of artifacts since 2013 and had never seen a completely intact piece like the one Mark had found. It turned out to be a fully functioning war club. This was a solid piece of wood carved to be a weapon of war, something designed specifically for bashing somebody to death with. Upon learning what he had discovered, Mark willingly handed the artifact over to be preserved by the Kamox First Nation. And right now, archaeologists are still working to find out more about it. It was definitely a weapon of violence, but it's unclear when it was made or how it ended up in Mark's backyard. For all he knows, his house is on a Native American graveyard or even on an undiscovered village buried beneath his property. Number 8. Lost Maya Capital. An ancient Maya city was discovered in the backyard of a cattle rancher in Mexico. Experts with Brown University were called in to excavate the site, which was quickly dubbed La Canja Tel Tal. Researchers believe the city was once a powerful Maya capital, settled around the year 750 BC, and occupied for about 1,000 years. It was the main hub for the governmental powers of the local kingdom of Sakzi, and then it was abandoned and forgotten. Over the following centuries of abandonment, the city was completely overgrown by vegetation, covered by dirt, and made invisible. It was only found when a farmer in the state of Chiapas uncovered a stone tablet in his backyard. The site was found by archaeologists by total luck. Whitaker Schroeder from the University of Pennsylvania was informed by a carnita seller on a highway that a local farmer had found something interesting. Whitaker was already studying archaeological sites in the area, so he agreed to check it out. That was in 2014, and it took 4 years until excavations could get started. Researchers don't believe this city was quite as large as other well-known cities like Palenque, another massive metropolis in Mexico's southern jungle. However, it did contain a giant pyramid, palaces occupied by the city's elite, and majestic religious sites. There is a grand plaza and great fortifications to keep out enemies. This was definitely a major capital, likely ruled over by a powerful king. But seeing as exploration has only just gotten underway, there is still a lot to be discovered about the lost city of La Canja Tel Tal. Number 7. World War II Wreckage. A Danish teenager and his father found the remains of a plane from World War II in their backyard. A 14-year-old doing a homework assignment came across the remains of a German Messerschmitt plane, along with the skeletal corpse of its pilot, just behind his house. The boy's name is Daniel Ram Christensen. His father, Klaus, had been told by his late grandfather that a plane crashed on their property during the war. However, Klaus's great-grandfather was notorious for making up stories that weren't entirely true, so the family never really believed him. But then, when Daniel said he had to do some history homework on the subject of World War II, Klaus suggested they excavate the backyard to see if the remains of the aircraft were really there. Much to their surprise, they found the wreckage. First, they found some scraps of metal, and this was a pretty big shock. They decided to dig even deeper and borrowed an excavator from the neighbor. The father and son duo dug about 20 feet deep in the backyard and uncovered thousands of scraps from the World War II aircraft. They also found the pilot's bones and personal objects hidden in the dirt. Forensic police are currently trying to figure out who the pilot was, as well as the situation around the crash. The rest of the artifacts have been taken to the local museum to be preserved. What would you do if you found a crashed World War II plane in your backyard? Let me know in the comments below. And now for number 6. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Dylan Morris and Paul Britt. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 6. Dinosaur Rib Cage. A property owner in Portugal recently embarked on some home renovations, and it didn't take long before he made a shocking discovery in his backyard. He found a full set of dinosaur ribs. Just underneath the surface of his yard was a dinosaur rib cage, something experts are saying could be the largest single set of dinosaur remains in all of Europe. This was one of the biggest discoveries for paleontologists in 2022. After the property owner uncovered the bones, a team of Spanish and Portuguese experts descended on the man's property to excavate. Experts believe it's a fossilized brachiosaurid sauropod. It belonged to the family of the largest dinosaurs that ever lived. Sauropods were the biggest animals that ever walked our planet. They had long necks, long tails, and some could grow up to 122 feet long. The dinosaur buried in the man's backyard was likely about 39 feet tall and 82 feet from the tip of its nose to the end of its tail. Its rib cage is big enough that you can have a party inside of it. You could literally drape a tarp over the ribs and turn the fossil into a small house. Number 5. Arizona Bomb Shelter. A man in Tucson discovered a bomb shelter hiding in his backyard from the Cold War. The homeowner is John Sims, and he bought the new home in Midtown from a friend earlier in the year. His friend told him after he purchased the property that there could be a bomb shelter in the backyard, but he wasn't entirely sure. In response, John said, "Give me a shovel and I'll dig it up right now." But John couldn't find anything. He dug several shallow holes in the backyard in the brutal summer heat and gave up. It looked like the bomb shelter was nothing but a rumor. But then he got a new idea. He hired a consultant who brought a metal detector and scanned the yard for any buried metal. And that was when they finally found the entrance to the bomb shelter buried 3 feet deep. John pried open the heavy metal hatch and descended into a small shelter filled with decades of rubble. Much to his disappointment, there were no artifacts to be found. There were no radiation detectors, no civil defense boxes, and no leftover war relics. All he found were some water jugs. But he did discover the history of the shelter. It was likely built by Whittaker Pools, who built many of these bomb shelters throughout Tucson in the 1960s at the height of nuclear fear. Homeowners were terrified that Russia would bomb America, and anyone with the money to spare was eager to get their own personal fallout shelter. Number 4. Mysterious Roman Slab. A homeowner in the small English village of White Parish discovered an ancient marble slab in the garden behind her bungalow. It was from the days when Rome ruled over the island of Great Britain. The mysterious slab contains Greek inscriptions that have dated it back to the 2nd century AD. But how exactly it got in the garden in the first place is still a mystery. The homeowner actually discovered the stone in the garden behind her house 20 years ago. She then used the stone in her stable as a horse mounting block. She stepped on this thing to get onto the back of her horse for about a decade before she finally noticed the mysterious Greek letters on the block. But just how did it arrive in her garden in the first place? According to antique specialist Will Hobbs, wealthy aristocrats often brought classical art, random artifacts, and other pieces of foreign culture back to England when they toured Europe in the 18th century. Someone with a lot of money likely picked the slab up from a market somewhere in Greece, then ditched it in the backyard outside their house. As for that Greek inscription, it reads, "The people and the young men honor Demetrius, son of Metrodorus, the son of Lucius." It's not exactly clear what that means though, but at least we have the family's names. Number 3. Ancient Mystery Sword. 4,000 years ago in the Bronze Age, somebody lost their sword. It got covered over in dirt, slowly decayed and broke into fragments, and nobody saw it again until recently, when a man in Finland found it in his parents' back garden. The sword dates back to 1700 BC and was pulled piece by piece out of the backyard by a man with a metal detector. His name is Matti Rintama, and he purchased the metal detector 2 weeks before he made this shocking discovery. One of the first places he went was his parents' large property in the village of Penella. He wasn't expecting much, but it seemed like a good place to start hunting for treasure. Sure enough, he found about half a dozen sword fragments and showed them to a more experienced friend. This friend told him he was dealing with a sword, and that was when Finland's National Board of Antiquities was called in. Archaeologists descended on the backyard like hungry scavengers. They soon uncovered the rest of the sword. The artifact is now one of only 25 similar weapons found from the Finnish Bronze Age. As for how the weapon got into the backyard, archaeologist Lina Koivisto says it was probably thrown into a shallow body of water. It may have been a marsh or a swamp, and someone either ditched the sword on purpose or lost it in their travels. The sword was then covered in layers of peat and eventually became part of a backyard. Number 2. Mammoth Bones. A paleontologist discovered a graveyard of mammoth bones in his own backyard. In an unbelievably coincidental discovery, he may have just found the oldest evidence of human beings in North America outside his own home. Paleontologist Timothy Rao first learned he had fossils in his backyard in 2013. One of his neighbors saw something sticking out from a hillside on his property in New Mexico. When Timothy went to investigate, he found a crushed mammoth skull and a tusk, along with other mammoth bones that were clearly broken on purpose. After more investigating and a few more years, Timothy and his colleagues had unveiled a mammoth butchering site dating back 37,000 years. This is huge for a lot of reasons, but mainly for the age of the site. Up until recently, most scientists agree that humans arrived in North America no earlier than 16,000 years ago. But the mammoth bones here show obvious signs of human intervention. The bones revealed evidence of being burned, pulverized, and worked over by human hands. This had been a place where early men and women gathered to process mammoth remains. Mammoths they likely helped hunt off the face of the earth, and they were doing it over 20,000 years before humans were supposed to have even been in North America. This is now one of the biggest archaeological finds in North American history. It's changing the history books as we know them, and it's all thanks to a nosy neighbor noticing a bone in Timothy's backyard. Number 1. Ice Age Horse. In 2018, landscapers in Lehi, Utah found the skeletal remains of a wild horse buried in a client's backyard. At first, researchers thought they were dealing with an ancient wild horse, one that roamed across the American Southwest in the days before highways and skyscrapers. It was originally dated at 16,000 years old, before the end of the last ice age. However, scientists soon realized that was wrong, and that the horse was likely buried about 11,700 years ago. But that turned out to be wrong as well. The hoofed beast has only been in the ground for 340 years, meaning it was a domestic horse that lived far more recently. It's understandable how these scientists got their information wrong. After all, North America was home to wild horses from between 50 million and 10,000 years ago. Wild horses only vanished across North America around the same time that the mammoths, dire wolves, short-faced bears, and giant sloths went extinct. It was a combination of climate change and early human hunters that led to the demise of all these animals. But this horse didn't come from prehistoric days. It died following the Spanish introduction of domestic horses in the 16th century. Archaeologists analyzed the bones and learned that the horse was about 12 years old at the time of death. The lead author of the study, William Taylor from the University of Colorado Boulder, says the horse was likely cared for by an indigenous person who lived in Utah. Researchers were even able to tell how frequently the horse had been ridden. The fractures were caused by somebody jostling on the horse's lower back. The horse also had arthritis and belonged to the species Equus caballus, a kind of modern domestic horse. And finally, researchers could tell that even though the horse suffered several injuries, it was cared for up until the time of death. Thanks for watching! What's the craziest thing you found in your backyard? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!